friends with benefits. That's a cute term that the people in marketing came up with to sell the kind of behavior that is usually common among mammals like bonobos, hyenas, and rats. Repurpose this behavior for a new target species that the people upstairs insist will be much, much easier to manage if they behave more like, monkeys, dogs, and rats. The problem is that despite the successful attempts to implement widespread availability of contraceptives and engineer a sharp decline in church attendance through constant mockery and social shaming, one of their greatest achievements of all, of course, we can't forget, the complete normalization of infanticide. You see, there's still, after all of these achievements, there were still portions of the population that seemed a little resistant to these efforts to undermine the power structure of the family unit, which is absolutely crucial if you want to dissolve the mechanism that people use, the mechanism in which Christian values are preserved and propagated through a society. These values are what always get in your way. That's what's always opposing your plan. There's these Western Christian values. So you have to go after the source. You have to dissolve the mechanism that preserves and propagates this wrongthink. Especially if you want to reduce people to one-size-fits-all consumerist debt slaves, individuals who individually all want the exact same things. Exactly the way you tell them they want it. And most importantly, these individuals, they have no real connections with each other. You see, groups are dangerous. A few nonconformists here and there, they don't pose a threat. In fact, they can serve as useful examples to the larger group who will see how isolating it is to be different, how powerless these people are, these loners. But not if they're able to group together. That can't be tolerated. There can't be anything that ties the individuals together. There can only be one bond, one single, unbreakable bond. And that is the bond between all these satellite individuals. The bond between these automatons and the will and the desires of the people upstairs. The most important bond to break, to create these rootless, wandering automatons. The root of all bonds. The foundation that needs cracking. The bond between man and woman. What a marvelous success this project has been in the last few decades. Even the people upstairs are blushing. Who would have imagined that this bond would be so easy to sabotage? Well, the people upstairs knew. After all, their master had showed them exactly how to do it. The bond between Adam and Eve that kept them in paradise was easily undermined simply by manipulating Eve. Their master taught them a long time ago, to get what you want, you don't have to manipulate the men. You simply manipulate the women, and once they're compromised, they'll manipulate the men for you. The people in research, they ran focus groups and discovered that men had the foresight and the reasoning capabilities to see the problems with socially deregulating the sexual marketplace and turning it into a free-for-all. Boys, of course, are a completely different story. boys, not men, are so hopped up on hormones and biologically hardwired to want all the casual monkey sex they can get their hands on. Boys aren't a problem. But boys don't make the rules. Men make the rules. And men instinctively want to protect their women. Especially if they have daughters, they understand they have to preserve the regulation of the marketplace. By making sex this impersonal thing, the same thing as playing a video game with a friend, it ruins women. So the people upstairs were going to have to necessarily first manipulate the women, who would then, once compromised, manipulate the men. If they could pull this off, eventually there wouldn't be any men. You know, once women were on board, the boys with a steady diet of meaningless dopamine without the pesky bonding with women or the reproductive process that often pushed these boys into being men. These boys could just be led around by their testicles for the rest of their lives, no problem, and just exist in this perpetual state of arrested development. The guys down in research, they ran focus group after focus group, and it seemed that even though they'd been wildly successful in their other efforts to manipulate women, into treating their reproductive organs as some kind of malady that needed to be treated with regular medication, and their children as some kind of parasite that had to be violently exterminated with surgical instruments as quickly as possible so they didn't get in the way of their trip to Cancun. There was still a lingering instinct that women seemed to be clinging to. They had this idea that there was something emotionally connecting about sex, which was confusing because they had already jumped on board the feminism train. It didn't make any sense. These girls had been programmed from an early age to believe they were either identical or superior to men. Certainly, they could enjoy sex the same way that men did, with the same detachment. Anything men could do, they could do. It just had to be marketed better and given a catchy name, rebranding. Instead of whoring around, it would be called Friends with Benefits. That just has a much nicer ring than being a complete slut. The people upstairs, they loved this new slogan, this Friends with Benefits. It was the perfect rebranding. So they gave the people in marketing an unlimited budget. So being creative really wasn't all that necessary when it came to manipulating women. And to be fair, being creative is rarely necessary when it comes to manipulating women. That's why fashion magazines fundamentally haven't changed since the invention of fashion magazines. And why every romantic comedy is interchangeable with every other romantic comedy. Romantic comedy? That's brilliant, said the boys in marketing. So they got to work on not one, but 2 movies they could use to manipulate women into getting on board with this whole Friends with Benefits thing. The first one they would call Friends with Benefits. I told you they don't have to be creative. And the second one they would call Friends with Benefits. Oh, come on, said the men upstairs. Women are easy to trick. We can have 2 movies with the exact same story, pushing the exact same message, but for God's sake, man, they can't have the exact same name. And so one of these scripts, and I'm actually not kidding, this unironically happened, they renamed to No Strings Attached. Love it, said the people upstairs. So what's the story about? Story? Said the people in marketing. No. That's not how this works. Women don't care about stories. Why do you think every romantic comedy has essentially the exact same story? They care about status. And in 2011, the 2 men with arguably the highest status in the sexual marketplace are Ashton Kutcher and Justin Timberlake. Bam. Done. This propaganda is already paying for itself. Without knowing anything else about this film, women will line up and buy enough tickets to make us millions. So what about the men? Presumably, men will see these movies too, even if some of them are being forced to see it on a date. Who are two women that every man in 2011 wants to have sex with, but who aren't so hot that it'll piss off the women in the audience? Just hot enough for the neurotic women to delusionally think they can relate to them. How about Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis? Done and done. Okay, so now we know that the women will come and see the movie because they want to see Justin Timberlake or Ashton Kutcher, and they want to be Natalie Portman or Mila Kunis. So now with all these women in the audience, all we have to do is just normalize the casual hookup culture by having all of the women in the film behave like teenage boys. And then to really sell it, we have the men in the movie behave like neurotic, promiscuous women. But why do that? Why have the women in the film always be the ones that want to make the first move? Why have it be the women who always insist that there be no strings attached? Why have it be the women that are afraid it's the men that will think it means more than it does? If you understand marketing to women, this is pretty easy to explain. Not only does this condition the women by watching women who they want to emulate in the film, it conditions the women in the audience to think that this kind of behavior is normal. But it also alleviates all the fears that come with knowing deep down inside that it's not normal. You see, the women know from experience that on a basic level, that unless they're sociopaths, that they will become emotionally connected with the men that they have sex with. And they won't like that the man is treating it casually. Outside the movie theater, in reality, this makes them feel cheap because they feel like they're giving up something valuable and arguably the most valuable thing that they have, giving it up as easily as they would an extra cigarette to a stranger. So by having the women in these movies be the cold, calculating personalities, it models the behavior for the impressionable girls in the audience, but it also tells them that the men won't treat it casually. In fact, it's the men who will become emotionally involved. They will pine over the women who are freely providing them sex and demand a relationship with them. What are you afraid of, you prudes? Don't you want a guy like Ashton or Justin? Well, this is the new game. Playing hard to get was your grandma's game. If you really want a guy now, you just have to have sex with him. You just have to casually have sex with him with complete emotional detachment, and eventually he'll fall in love with you. He won't be able to live without your vagina. That's how it works. He will totally think that sex with you is a unique, magical experience that can't be replicated with all the other women who are also giving him casual sex. You see, it's your vagina is special. That's how it works. And then at the end, you'll be at Grand Central Station while a flash mob that the love of your life has paid to be there in advance dances away to your favorite songs while he professes his love for you. It's as simple as that, ladies. You might be thinking that sounds a little heavy-handed, but don't think the marketing team doesn't do their homework. This might all seem too on the nose, but it's also the subtleties. All about the subtleties. The subtleties like not having any father characters at all for the girls. In fact, in the Friends with Benefits film, Mila's mom is a single mother boomer who loves that her kid is finally acting the way she did in the 70s, finally having random sex, and doesn't even know who her father is. The marketing team, they know their audience very well. They were the same marketing team telling the boomers in the 1970s to just do a bunch of drugs and have anonymous sex. Which is exactly what created all these fatherless homes, all these single mother households that were raising these Gen Xers and millennials who would be very receptive to the whole friends with benefits thing. Once they have kids, whichever children they don't abort, they can tell those kids, who wants to play the same old video game over and over again? People have been playing this video game for centuries. Let's play all these new games. Let's play whatever game comes out, and let's all try to get the high score until we're all just fucking each other in the ass and chopping our cocks off, because what does it matter anyway? We're all going to live happily ever after. For BlackPilled, I'm Devin Stack. If you like my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you share. If you want to support my work, you can send crypto to one of the addresses below or become a patron at patreon.com/BlackPilled, or grab a copy of my book. The link is in the description.